What is up, guys? So I know I haven't made a video in a couple of days now. It wasn't a vacation that I planned, it's just that I just didn't make a video. But anyway, I'm back now with a breakdown for Black Lightning along with Supergirl and Batwoman because I didn't break down those two episodes yesterday, so I'm doing it now instead. Also, because there wasn't really much to break down, I probably could not have made an entire video about those episodes. Even though Supergirl had its 100th episode, there still wasn't enough to break down in its own video. So in this video will be Supergirl, which is Supergirl Season 5, Episode 13, titled It's a Super Life, which is also the 100th episode, Batwoman Season 1, Episode 13, titled Drink Me, and Black Lightning Season 3, Episode 14, titled The Book of War, Homecoming. With that in mind, let's begin with Supergirl. So, like I said, this is the 100th episode of Supergirl. This would be the third Arrowverse show, the third main Arrowverse shows to get to 100th episodes, but if you count more than the actual regular Arrowverse, then Smallville did so as well, but it's not a common thing. It's not something that a lot of TV shows do, not something most TV shows do, but Supergirl actually managed to do so, with this being the 100th episode of the show. Now, even with it being the 100th episode, there isn't really much to talk about, because a lot of it is just revamping what we've seen before, or maybe slight differences to previous episodes and previous events. There is to talk about like which episodes we went back to, which episodes we saw, which I will, but other than that, there really isn't much. Before we get to anything else that has to do with the episode, there is the character of Mr.Mxzptlx, as he's now played by a different actor than how he's played in Supergirl Season 2. I thought that maybe the way that they could explain this is that the Crisis changed the way he looks, because the Crisis changed certain things, it merged universes. I think that it's very easy to make certain characters look different, like they're free to bring back any character that isn't attached to a beloved actor by just recasting them. I mean, that's something they could do before, but it's a lot easier now, and it's something they can explain in canon. So maybe thought that maybe that's how Mr.Mxzptlx was changed and that's why he looks differently, but at the same time, I don't think a fifth dimensional imp would be affected by the multiversal changes, because he is outside of the multiverse. He's basically more powerful than the entire multiverse, so he wouldn't really be affected by this. So the way they explain it is a lot more simple. As it turns out, the look that he had in Season 2 was not his true form, which is good, because not only is that not how he looks in the comics, also, why would a fifth-dimensional imp look like a regular human being? But also, they actually gave a reason for why he made himself look that way. He did that to impress and maybe even seduce Kara back in Season 2, and that's also why he gave himself the accent. This time around, he doesn't have that look, because he doesn't really have that intention at all. And while they never explain why he has the look he has now, I would think that it's probably just a random look that he chose, but it's also not his true form, because that wouldn't really be much better. I mean, again, he would still be a human looking person, but the true form of Mr.Mxzptlx, the fifth dimensional imp form, which is closer to the comics, is seen right at the end, where we see like this blue energy of sorts flying around next to Kara's apartment. That is his true form, or at least that's a version of his true form. Now, this is not really what he looks like in the comics. In the comics, he looks like a small person who floats around and he looks really weird. He doesn't really look like a regular human being, but it looks closer to a human being than he does on the show, or his true form on the show. So I don't really know if that's where they're going to keep the true form, but at the same time, I don't mind it, because I think a fifth dimensional imp looking like that makes a lot more sense than them looking like a regular human being. So in this episode, Supergirl goes to previous episodes on the show, something that they're basically copying from the 100th episode of The Flash, where in that episode, Barry and Nora time traveled to previous episodes on the show during seasons 1, 2, and 3. They could have went to season 4, but they didn't. But they went back to collect items so that they can defeat the main villain, Cicada. This time around, it's similar, but not exactly the same, as she's not going back in time to collect any items, but instead change events, which is definitely something that they focused on The Flash as well. But she's not going back in time necessarily. She's going to these fake realities fabricated by Mr.Mxzptlx, where it is set in previous time periods, but it's not exactly time travel, since she's not going to the past of the current real reality. She's going to fake ones. So, the episodes that we return to in this episode include, and I'll go in chronological order, not in order of when we get to them in the episode, which I think might be exactly backwards, but anyway, there's Season 2, Episode 1, which is the debut episode of Superman, and more importantly for this episode, Lena Luthor, where this time around Kara attempts to tell Lena her name from the very beginning, which ends up in what we see during, I think it was Season 4, Episode 2 and 3, which is where Agent Liberty shows up, but I'll get to that in a second, because there is an episode before that, which is Season 3, Episode 18. In Season 3, Episode 18, and I guess also Episode 17, the Super Friends go to Sam's mother's house, Rain's mother's house, where I think in Episode 18 it ends with her death. But in this actual episode, not in Season 3, Episode 18, we see a different thing, where this time around Lena knows the Supergirl is Kara Danvers, and helps out in the fight against Rain, but this ends in her death. I think that the best thing we get from this is the return of Mon-El, who we haven't seen since the end of Season 3, which I think the show has been sorely lacking, not only because he's a really cool character with an awesome costume, but also because something that we clearly see in this episode is that he and Kara definitely, I think, should be together, and the fact that they aren't is at the detriment of the show, especially now with William that we're getting in this season. So I definitely think they should bring Mon-El back, but they just never will. And if they don't, I definitely want to see a Legion of Superheroes spin-off show. Then there's the beginning of Season 4, which is like Episode 2 and 3, where we see an altered version, altered by Supergirl changing things during Season 2, Episode 1, where this time around Lena knows that Kara is Supergirl, and Agent Liberty knows this, and tries to use this against Kara. He kidnaps Lena, and also kidnaps the cult leader of the Kryptonian cult. Don't remember his name, I'll put it on screen, but this ends with Kara revealing her identity, which she thinks is fine, but that ends with the deaths of all of the Super Friends, including somehow Martian Manhunter was killed. I don't know how that would work. I mean, he can be killed, but just because people know that he is friends with Supergirl, I don't think that would lead to his death. But anyway, obviously this is not good, but that is the final thing we see from like going back to episodes, except for we see like a shot of Season 4, Episode 20, although we never really go back to that episode. We only see it on this Mxzptlx thing, which is a clear reference to Netflix, where we actually see the Supergirl logo in canon, which is another thing they took from The Flash, where in an episode where The Flash went to the Flash Museum in the future, we did see the exact logos, like the real world logos used in canon, so that's something that they've now used on The Flash and on Supergirl. However, for Supergirl, it's more of a Mr.Mxzptlx thing, not a real thing, but we also see that Mr.Mxzptlx has separated the events of Kara's life into seasons 1, 2, 3, and 5, 4, and 5, which is exactly what we have in the real world as well. So before I move on to the next show, which by the way was going to be Batwoman, but there's nothing to talk about from that episode, so I'm going to go straight to Black Lightning. There's one more thing I want to go over for this episode of Supergirl, which is that since it's a milestone episode, like the 100th episode of the show, something that it seems like every milestone episode is doing, like the 100th episode of The Flash or the 100th/150th episodes of Arrow, is bring back a lot of characters and actors who haven't been on the show for a while or used to have a very, very large role, but don't anymore. They did that on all those episodes, and they did it in this one as well. So I'll go over 1, every character who did return, 2, every character who was supposed to return but didn't because of scheduling issues, and then also characters who I thought should have returned based off their roles in the show up until this point. So with that in mind, here are every character who did return, which it's like 6 or 7 characters, like Mon-El, Samantha Arias, and Rain, Ben Lockwood, aka Agent Liberty, Windshot, aka Toyman. Even though he did appear in the previous 2 episodes as well, it is still a reappearance of sorts, since he is still a guest star and has been since Season 3 ended. But then there's also Patricia Arias, Samantha Arias' mother, Otis Graves, and Thomas Coville, and I think you could also count Lillian Luthor, who appeared in a photo. There are 2 characters who were supposed to return but couldn't because of scheduling issues, and that's Cat Grant and James Olsen, who Cat Grant appeared in a photo while James Olsen appeared in archive footage, but neither of them actually appeared like in new scenes in this episode. And the characters who I think should have appeared include both Non and Rhea, since every other main villain, or actually Non, Rhea, and Lex Luthor, since those are three main villains who didn't appear while the likes of Agent Liberty and Reign did. I think why not just include every single main villain, because that's what they did in Season 4, in Season 5 of The Flash, in the 100th episode. Every main villain before Cicada appeared in that episode. But then there's also the likes of, I think, Saturn Girl, Miss Martian, Superman, Lois Lane, Maggie Sawyer, and other characters who I'm not going to go over here, who had a very large role on this show and deserve to have a role in this milestone episode because of the previous roles that they've had. So with that in mind, let's just move on to Black Lightning. So then there's Black Lightning, Season 3, Episode 14, titled The Book of War: Homecoming, which there isn't as much to talk about as the last two episodes of the season. I don't think it's necessarily as good as those episodes, but I do think there is a couple things to talk about, or at least more to talk about than Batwoman, that's for sure. Now, near the beginning of the episode, there's this dinner scene with the Pierces, where in this scene, Jefferson actually mentions that he witnessed the destruction of multiple universes, and he helped save the current one. This is a reference to Crisis on Infinite Earths, where the universes were destroyed. Obviously, he was like one of the last surviving people in the entire multiverse, as he looked at the destruction of Earth while he was in the Wave Rider, so he was one of the last people to die, but then he was brought back by Oliver Queen, by the Spectre, and now on Earth Prime, he was reminded of the previous worlds by Martian Manhunter, and he helped save the current one by fighting the Shadow Demons and the Anti-Monitor. So this is a clear reference to that, which I think is awesome. I think they should reference it more because of how huge it was, how much it changes things. On Black Lightning, they really only mentioned it in the beginning of the first episode, and I would love for them to just mention it more and have it have a bigger impact than it might have had as we've seen so far. Another kind of reference from this episode, it has to do with Brandon. Now, if you don't know, Brandon is not a character from the comics, but the fact that his name is Brandon, which is similar to Brion, and his powers are Earth-based, and also that he has the connection to Markovia, it's clear that he is based off Brion Markov, aka Geoforce. However, it's possible that he is not based off him, he actually is him, as I think that since his last name has yet to be revealed, and Brandon is kind of similar to Brion, it might be revealed that his last name is Markov, and that his birth name is Brion, but he's just going by Brandon. But something that we get in this episode is that Helga Jace confirms that his father is alive, and his father lives in Markovia, which means that it's possible that his father has some sort of position of power in Markovia. And while it's confirmed that Markovia has a president, I think that it's possible that they also have a king, so maybe the father that Helga Jace mentions is the king of Markovia, like Brion's father is in the comics, or maybe the father is going to be based off Brion's brother or something, or maybe his uncle, a character we saw in Young Justice. But either way, the fact that Brandon, has a relative that lives in Markovia, and his last name has yet to be revealed, and also he has Geoforce abilities. I think it's going to be revealed in the next couple episodes, which there are, I think, only 2 episodes left in the season, but I think it'll be revealed that his name is either Brandon Markov, or his birth name was indeed Brion Markov, and he is maybe the son of the king of Markovia, but he is going to become Geoforce, which I am definitely down for that. So the final thing to talk about in the Black Lightning episode has to do with who I think is the main villain of the episode, Gravedigger. Since there are only, I think it was 2 episodes left, and then he's at least the villain in the next episode, I'm pretty sure that Gravedigger is going to end up being the main villain of the season. But something that we learned in this episode is that he is actually a lot older than he looks, as he is like 90 years old. He got his powers around the 1940s or 50s, as it's said by Peter Gamby 70 plus years ago. He got his powers 70 years ago now would be 1950, but he said 70 plus, so it was probably in the mid to late 1940s, but he's also mentioned by Peter Gamby to be the very first metahuman. Now, this could mean a lot of things. I think this is really interesting because of how it works with who were considered to be the first metahumans earlier. Now, this could mean either Gravedigger is, he got his powers before 70 years ago, so like before the 1940s, and Peter Gamby is right, or Peter Gamby is wrong, and he just thinks he's right, because he's never heard of the original metahumans, the Justice Society of America, who, in Earth 1 at least, were considered to be the first metahumans, which is confirmed through invasion where the Dominators came to the 1950s because of the Justice Society of America, because of characters like at least Obsidian, who clearly has metahuman abilities. They were the first metahumans, and they got their powers. They were the JSA from 1942, so they got their powers before that, which is way before 70 plus years ago, which would probably have to be mid 40s to 50s, so it's got to be before Gravedigger, which leads to the final thing, that final possibility, which is that Peter Gamby is correct, and Gravedigger is the original metahuman, and the JSA don't exist on this world. The reason the JSA might not exist on Earth Prime has to do with, obviously, Crisis on Infinite Earths and the Earth Prime changes. Specifically, I think that the idea of the Justice Society of America went like the opposite route that it did in the comics. In the comics, it went from being on an alternate universe to before the Justice League on the same universe. This time around, it seems like it's before the Justice League, or before some sort of superhero team in the same universe. But because of the Crisis, it's now on a separate universe, which is Earth 2. At the end of Crisis on Infinite Earths, we saw Earth 2, and it seems like that's where Stargirl will take place, which has its own Justice Society of America, which is drastically different from the pre-Crisis version of Earth 2, and it's actually the same as the comic book pre-Crisis version of Earth 2, and I think that's probably where they're going. I think that probably means that the Justice Society of America do not exist on Earth Prime. It's just the Justice League, or I guess whatever the team's called at this point, and the JSA only exists on Earth 2, which would mean that Peter Gamby saying that Gravedigger is the first metahuman, despite the fact that he got his powers in like the late 40s to early 50s. I think that he is right about that, unless there were other unconfirmed metahumans before that, unless the likes of Vandal Savage or the Hawkman and Hawkgirl, maybe they were considered metahumans, but at this point, I think that Peter Gamby can be correct, unless the JSA do indeed exist on Earth Prime, which is yet to be revealed. So those are the breakdowns. If you want to know my opinions, I thought Supergirl was good. It was a good milestone episode, not necessarily an amazing episode overall, but definitely not bad. Black Lightning was also pretty good, which it wasn't really as good as the last two episodes, but it definitely had its moments, including a Gravedigger's fight scene in the foresty area. That was amazing, this one-shot fight scene that kept on going. It really felt like something Arrow would do recently, and it just feels like Black Lightning has completely upped its game in a lot of things, one of which are the fight scenes, and the Batwoman episode was tough to get through, but those are my opinions on those three episodes. So let me know your thoughts about the episodes in the comments down below, and if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.